The forest was Emily Nakamura's sanctuary. A vibrant, untamed world she dedicated her life to protecting. But that peace was shattered one night, when flames roared through the trees, consuming her research and threatening everything she had worked for. Whispers of illegal loggers and their enforcers, the notorious Iron Fangs biker gang, had lingered for weeks. Now, the stakes had risen. Emily's aunt, Ruth Nakamura, a retired Navy medic with a lifetime of battles behind her, arrives determined to fight back. But can a team of veterans, rangers, and volunteers stand against a web of greed and destruction threatening to engulf the forest? Leave a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. If you enjoy stories like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss our next inspiring journey tomorrow. The forest was alive with the hum of cicadas and the rustle of leaves in the gentle wind. To Emily Nakamura, it was more than a research site, it was a living, breathing entity she had devoted her life to protecting. Every day she spent among the towering pines and delicate underbrush felt like a small victory against the forces that sought to destroy it. Emily crouched near a stream, her notebook open as she sketched the delicate wings of a rare butterfly. She had been tracking the population for months, collecting data to support her report on the forest's endangered species. But her work had drawn the attention of more than just conservationists. Over the past few weeks, Emily had noticed the subtle signs of intrusion: trees marked for cutting, tire tracks where there should have been none, and the distant sound of chainsaws breaking the serene quiet. She had captured photos and videos of illegal logging operations, intending to expose the perpetrators. But her discoveries had put her squarely in the crosshairs of a group with no regard for the law, and even less for those who stood in their way. Ruth Nakamura sat at her kitchen table, the morning light streaming through the window as she flipped through a faded photo album. Each image told a story: her days as a Navy medic in Vietnam, the faces of the men and women she had served alongside, and the bonds forged in the crucible of war. Though decades had passed, she still met regularly with a few of her comrades, sharing memories and offering support. They were her anchor, her reminder that service didn't end with the war. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw Emily's name. Answering, she immediately sensed the tension in her niece's voice. "Aunt Ruth," Emily began. Her words rushed. "Something's wrong. I think I'm being watched out here." Ruth's brow furrowed. "Watched? By who?" "I don't know," Emily admitted. "But it's not just the loggers anymore. There's a group, bikers. I think they've been circling the area. It feels like they're trying to scare me off." Ruth's grip tightened on the phone. "You need to be careful," she said firmly. "If they're trying to intimidate you, it's because they know you're a threat. Don't underestimate them." Emily's voice softened. "I'll be okay, Aunt Ruth. I thought you should know." But Ruth knew better. She had seen what desperation could drive people to do, and she wasn't about to take any chances. The fire came just days later. Ruth received the call late in the evening, Emily's voice panicked and shaking. "They set it on fire," Emily cried. "The forest, my equipment, everything's gone." Ruth's heart sank, but her voice remained steady. "Are you safe?" I think so," Emily replied. "I ran as soon as I saw the flames. The rangers are trying to put it out. But it's bad, Aunt Ruth. They did this to stop me." Ruth's mind raced. The bikers Emily had mentioned were likely tied to the loggers, hired muscle to silence anyone who got too close to the truth. She could feel the anger bubbling beneath her calm exterior. A familiar fire that had driven her through the most harrowing days of her life. "I'll be there first thing in the morning," Ruth said, already planning her next move. "You're not facing this alone." True to her word, Ruth arrived early the next day, her car packed with supplies. The scene that greeted her was devastating. Blackened trees stood like skeletal reminders of what had been, and the air was thick with the smell of ash. Emily stood at the edge of the damage, her face streaked with soot and tears as she surveyed the ruins of her work. Ruth placed a reassuring hand on her niece's shoulder. "We'll rebuild," she said firmly. "But first, we're going to make sure the people responsible for this never do it again." Emily turned to her, a glimmer of hope breaking through her despair. "How?" she asked. "I have friends," Ruth replied, a determined look in her eyes. "And we've faced worse than this." As Ruth reached for her phone to call her old comrades, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The forest may have been scarred, but it wasn't lost. Together, they would fight to protect it and the future it represented. The morning after her arrival, Ruth Nakamura sat at the small dining table in Emily's cabin, her phone in hand. Her face was set in determined lines as she dialed the first number. It had been years since she had called upon her old Navy comrades for anything beyond a friendly check-in. But she knew they would answer. "Ruth?" The voice on the other end was raspy but familiar. "Been a while. What's going on?" Ruth wasted no time. "Hank, I need your help. My niece's research site was targeted by loggers. They've hired bikers to scare her off. And they've already started a fire. This isn't just about her work, it's about protecting what's left of this forest." There was a brief pause before Hank replied. "Say no more. I'll grab the gear and be there by tomorrow." One by one, Ruth made her calls. The responses were immediate and unwavering. Each of her comrades brought a specific skill: tactical planning, engineering expertise, and even reconnaissance training. By the end of the day, Ruth had assembled a small but formidable team of veterans who shared her drive to protect and defend. The following afternoon, a dusty SUV pulled up to Emily's cabin. Out stepped Hank, followed by a wiry woman in her 60s named Ellen and a burly man with an easy grin named Vic. They greeted Ruth warmly, their camaraderie instantly reigniting despite the years. "You've got yourself a situation, Ruth," Ellen said as she surveyed the forest. "But we've handled worse." Emily approached tentatively, unsure how to interact with this group of seasoned veterans. Ruth introduced her with pride. "This is my niece, Emily. She's the reason we're here, and the one who knows this forest better than anyone." Emily nodded, her voice steady despite the weight of the recent events. "Thank you for coming. I can show you where the loggers have been working in the areas most at risk." That evening, the group gathered around a large map spread across Emily's dining table. Emily marked key points where illegal logging had been documented, while the forest rangers added their knowledge of trails and vulnerable areas. Hank and Ellen began formulating a strategy, their military training evident in the precision of their planning. "We'll start by setting up surveillance," Hank said. "Hidden cameras and motion detectors in these areas." He pointed to trails leading to the logging sites. "We need to catch them in the act. And we'll need fire breaks here and here," Ellen added, circling spots on the map. "If they try to start another fire, we'll make sure it doesn't spread." Ruth nodded. "Emily, your knowledge of the terrain is critical. You'll guide us to the best spots for setting up defenses and gathering evidence." Emily hesitated for a moment but then straightened her shoulders. "Whatever it takes." Word of the effort spread quickly through the small community, drawing in volunteers eager to help. Locals arrived with tools, supplies, and a shared determination to protect their forest. Among them was Mary, the owner of the general store, who donated food and equipment. A group of teenagers showed up, eager to assist in clearing debris and digging fire breaks. "We can't let them win," Mary said firmly as she handed Emily a box of supplies. "This forest belongs to all of us." The community's involvement brought a renewed sense of hope. Together, they rebuilt Emily's damaged equipment, piecing together what had been lost in the fire. Under Ruth's guidance, they fortified the most vulnerable areas, turning the forest into a strategic defensive zone. In the days that followed, Ruth and her team worked tirelessly. Hank and Ellen rigged cameras and motion sensors along key trails, ensuring the loggers' movements would be recorded. Vic used his engineering background to construct sturdy barriers and traps to deter further incursions. Emily led the group through dense underbrush, pointing out paths the loggers might use to evade detection. "They'll try to come back," Emily said as she crouched near a marked tree. "This spot has the most valuable timber. If we can catch them here, it'll prove their intent." Ruth placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "And we will," she said. "But we're not just catching them. We're making sure they can't do this again." As the sun set on another long day, the group gathered around a campfire near the edge of the forest. The veterans shared stories from their service, their laughter and banter providing a moment of levity amidst the tension. Emily listened intently, gaining a deeper understanding of her aunt and her friends. "You know," Vic said, gesturing to the forest around them, "we've fought for a lot of things in our lives. This feels just as important." Ruth nodded, her gaze steady. "It is. And we're going to win. Not just for the forest, but for everyone who depends on it." The group fell silent, each of them reflecting on the fight ahead. The forest was more than just trees and wildlife, it was a symbol of resilience, of standing together against forces that sought to destroy. As the fire crackled and the stars emerged overhead, Ruth felt a familiar sense of purpose. She had faced impossible odds before, and she would face them again. This time, she wasn't alone. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel, it means so much to us. Now, let's get back to the story. Ruth Nakamura crouched low behind a fallen tree, her sharp eyes scanning the distant clearing. Hank and Ellen were beside her, their breathing steady despite the tension in the air. A faint hum of machinery broke the stillness of the forest, the unmistakable sound of chainsaws at work. Through the gaps in the foliage, they could see the loggers, moving methodically as they marked trees and operated heavy equipment. "They're getting bolder," Hank whispered, raising his binoculars. "No attempt to cover their tracks this time." Ruth nodded. "Good. The more careless they are, the easier it will be to catch them in the act." She gestured to Emily, who was positioned farther back with a camera in hand. Emily captured every movement, her focus unwavering despite the nerves that made her hands tremble. The bikers weren't far off, their motorcycles parked haphazardly near the loggers' trucks. A few of them patrolled the perimeter, their presence a clear warning to anyone who might get too close. The Iron Fangs had taken on the role of enforcers, intimidating anyone who dared interfere with the loggers' operations. The team had been monitoring the loggers and bikers for days, gathering as much evidence as they could. They had set up hidden cameras along the trails, capturing footage of illegal tree felling and the aggressive tactics used to keep locals at bay. Each new piece of evidence added to their growing case, but the bikers' presence made every mission fraught with danger. One evening, as the group reviewed their footage in Emily's cabin, a knock at the door startled them. Hank moved to answer, his hand instinctively resting near his holstered knife. When he opened the door, A man stood silhouetted against the fading light, a biker. But not one of the aggressive enforcers they had seen in the forest. He was younger. His leather jacket worn and his face tight with worry. I need to talk to Ruth Nakamura, he said. His voice low. Hank glanced back at Ruth, who stepped forward with a wary expression. I'm Ruth. Who are you? Name's Jake, the man said, shifting uncomfortably. I'm with the Fangs. But I didn't sign up for this. Burning down forests? Scaring off researchers? That's not what he trailed off, running a hand through his hair. Look, I've got information. If you're serious about stopping them, I want to help. Ruth studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deceit. Why now? She asked. Because I saw what they did, Jake said, his voice trembling slightly. And I found out why. The loggers aren't just cutting down trees. They're clearing the land for a development project. Condos. Shopping centers. The whole deal. And they're paying off the Fangs to do their dirty work. Most of the guys don't know. But I overheard a call. It's bigger than we thought. Jake's revelation changed everything. The team now had a clearer picture of the operation. But it also raised the stakes. The loggers and their backers had far more to lose. And their willingness to escalate violence was almost certain. Using the information Jake provided, Ruth and her team identified the key players involved. One name stood out, a local official with a history of shady dealings who appeared to be orchestrating the entire scheme. Ruth's resolve hardened as she realized the full scope of what they were up against. With Jake's help, the team set up additional surveillance near the loggers' base of operations. Emily guided them through dense parts of the forest, using her knowledge of the terrain to stay out of sight. At one point, they came dangerously close to a group of bikers, their laughter carrying through the trees as they patrolled the area. The veterans moved silently, their training evident in every step, while Emily's determination kept her fear at bay. The tension finally boiled over one night when the team encountered an ambush. As they made their way back from placing a hidden camera, a group of bikers emerged from the shadows, blocking the trail. Ruth's heart pounded as she signaled for the others to hold their ground. Looks like we've got some nosy visitors, one of the bikers sneered, stepping forward with a crowbar in hand. What are you doing out here? Just enjoying the forest, Ruth replied calmly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The biker scoffed. You're a long way from the hiking trails. Maybe we should show you the way back. Before the situation could escalate, Jake appeared from the other side of the clearing. Leave them alone, he said firmly, stepping between the bikers and Ruth's team. Jake, what the hell are you doing? One of the bikers snapped. Making sure you don't do something stupid, Jake replied, his tone brooking no argument. Get out of here. Now. The bikers hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty and frustration. Finally, they retreated, muttering curses under their breath. Ruth exhaled slowly, her grip on her cane relaxing. That was close, Ellen muttered as they continued down the trail. Too close. Back at the cabin, the team reviewed the footage from their latest surveillance mission. It confirmed everything Jake had said. The loggers were clearing land for development, and the operation was being funded by a network of wealthy investors with the local official at its center. They're using the Fangs as scapegoats, Jake said, his voice heavy with disgust. And most of the guys don't even know it. Ruth looked around the room, her expression resolute. We have everything we need, she said. Now, we finish this. The team knew the battle ahead would be their hardest yet. But with the evidence in hand and their resolve stronger than ever, they were ready to take the fight to the loggers and their backers. no matter the cost. The clearing was perfect for what Ruth Nakamura and her team had planned. It was secluded but accessible enough to draw their adversaries in. Emily's decoy research site was set up with meticulous care, tents, equipment, and even mock samples of endangered species data. To an untrained eye, it looked like an easy, vulnerable target, exactly what they needed it to be. "They'll take the bait," Hank said confidently as he secured a hidden camera in the branches of a nearby tree. "There's no way they'll resist." "Let's hope you're right," Ruth replied, her voice steady but her eyes scanning the perimeter. The air was thick with anticipation. "Everyone knows their roles?" The team nodded in unison. Ellen adjusted the settings on a motion detector, while Vic double-checked the reinforced barriers they had constructed to block potential escape routes. Emily stood nearby, her nerves barely concealed as she clutched her notebook. "It'll be okay," Ruth assured her, placing a hand on her niece's shoulder. "We're ready for this." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the loggers arrived, their trucks rumbling into the clearing like an invading force. The bikers weren't far behind, their motorcycles snarling through the forest. The two groups converged at the site, their postures tense but unified in their purpose. "This is it," one of the loggers sneered, kicking over a tripod. "Doesn't look like much." "We're not here to analyze it," growled the biker leader, a hulking man known only as Snake. "We're here to send a message. Burn it. Smash it. Whatever it takes." As the men moved deeper into the site, the motion detectors triggered silently, activating the hidden cameras. Ruth and her team watched from a concealed position nearby, every move of the invaders recorded in real time. When Snake gave the order to torch the tents, Ruth signaled to her team. They sprang into action, floodlights bursting to life and illuminating the clearing like a stage. The sudden brightness disoriented the loggers and bikers, who froze in confusion. "What the hell?" one of the loggers shouted, shielding his eyes. "Hold it right there!" Ruth's voice rang out, firm and commanding. She stepped into the light, flanked by Hank, Ellen, and Vic. Each of them held their ground with the quiet confidence of seasoned veterans. "You've been caught," Ruth said, holding up a small recorder. "We have everything we need to put you away, the footage, the evidence, and even your conversations." Snake snarled, stepping forward aggressively. "You think you're tough, old lady? This ain't over." Before anyone could react, Jake emerged from the shadows, his voice cutting through the tension. "It is over." "Snake," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They know everything. About the loggers. About the development. About how we've been used." Snake whipped around to face him, fury etched into his features. "What are you talking about?" "I heard the calls," Jake said, stepping closer. "The loggers and their backers are just using us to do their dirty work. They don't care about us, and they'll throw us under the bus the second it benefits them." The bikers murmured among themselves, the seeds of doubt taking root. One of them, a younger man with uncertainty in his eyes, turned to Snake. "Is it true? Did you know about this?" Snake hesitated, his bluster faltering. "I don't have to explain myself to you," he snapped. But the damage was done. The unity of the group was shattered, leaving them vulnerable. As the bikers argued among themselves, the loggers attempted to slip away. But Vic and Ellen were ready. Reinforced barriers and strategically placed obstacles blocked their escape routes, and Hank's booming voice halted them in their tracks. "Not so fast," he said, stepping out from behind a tree. "You've got questions to answer." The sound of sirens in the distance grew louder, and relief washed over Ruth. The forest rangers and local authorities had arrived. Just as planned. The officers poured into the clearing. Their presence a reassuring sight as they moved to secure the area. "You're all under arrest," one of the rangers announced, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We have evidence linking you to illegal logging, arson, and conspiracy." The bikers and loggers were herded together. Their defiance replaced with resignation. Snake glared at Ruth as he was led away. But she met his gaze without flinching. As the clearing emptied, Emily approached Ruth, her voice trembling with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "We did it," she said. Ruth smiled faintly, placing an arm around her niece's shoulders. "No, Emily," she said. "You did it. This was your fight. And you never gave up." Jake lingered nearby, watching as the team packed up their equipment. He stepped forward hesitantly. I'm sorry for everything," he said. "If there's a way to make it right, I want to help." Ruth regarded him thoughtfully before nodding. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she said. "If you're serious, there's plenty of work to be done." As the first light of dawn broke over the forest, the clearing stood empty once more. But its significance was etched into the memories of everyone who had been there. Justice had prevailed, and the forest had been given a chance to heal, a testament to the power of resilience, unity, and the courage to stand up for what mattered most. The forest bore its scars, but the healing had begun. Volunteers arrived daily, armed with shovels, saplings, and determination. The community had turned its outrage into action, rallying to restore what had been damaged. Among the workers was Jake, the former Iron Fangs member who had helped turn the tide. His presence was met with cautious glances at first, but as days turned into weeks, skepticism gave way to respect. Jake worked tirelessly, hauling debris and planting trees alongside the locals. He listened intently as Emily explained the delicate balance of the forest ecosystem, her passion inspiring him in ways he hadn't expected. The veterans, too, welcomed Jake into their fold, seeing in him the same spark of redemption that had guided them through their darkest moments. "Good work today," Hank said, clapping Jake on the back after a long day. "You've earned your place here." Jake nodded, his voice quiet but sincere. "Thanks. I never thought I'd be part of something like this." Ruth Nakamura watched the progress from the edge of the clearing, a quiet pride swelling within her. The forest's recovery mirrored her own journey, a testament to resilience and the power of standing together. She thought back to her days as a Navy medic, where every victory had been a shared effort, every loss a shared burden. "It's funny," she said to Ellen, who stood beside her. "This fight wasn't so different from the ones we faced back then. Different battlefield, same principles." Ellen smiled, her gaze on the volunteers. "Service doesn't end when the uniform comes off. You taught me that." Ruth nodded, her thoughts drifting to her niece. Emily's courage had been the spark that set everything in motion. Without her determination, the forest might have been lost. Later that evening, as the day's work wound down, Emily approached Ruth with a look of gratitude and determination. "I don't even know how to thank you," Emily began, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do any of this. But you did. You fought for me. For this forest." Ruth smiled warmly. "You fought first, Emily. All I did was stand beside you." Emily shook her head. "You did so much more. And now it's my turn. I'm going to keep going, keep fighting for this place. For stronger protections. I owe that to you. To everyone. You owe it to yourself. Ruth said, her voice gentle. This is your calling, Emily. Don't let anyone take it away from you. The next morning, as the sun rose over the forest, its golden light filtering through the remaining trees, Ruth stood at the edge of the clearing. The sight filled her with hope. The forest would recover. It would take time, but it would heal, just as they all would. Jake walked over, a tentative smile on his face. Heading out soon? He asked. Ruth nodded. Our work here is done. The rest is in good hands. She looked at him thoughtfully. You've come a long way, Jake. Don't stop now. I won't, he promised. As Ruth joined her fellow veterans by their truck, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This fight, though unexpected, had been worth every moment. It had reminded her of the values she held dear: loyalty, courage, and the unyielding belief that some things were worth protecting. As they drove away, leaving the forest and its people to their hopeful future, Ruth allowed herself to smile. The battle was over, but the legacy they'd created would endure.
The forest stands stronger, a symbol of resilience and unity. Ruth and Emily's fight reminds us all of the importance of protecting what matters most. What would you do to save something you love? Share your thoughts and this story with others. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.